Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar sponsored and presented by Thermostats International Corp. Entitled Electric Floor Heating, Wood Flooring Installation Methods, and Managing Customer Expectations. My name is Sharon Schaller, the Member Engagement Manager at NWFA, and I will serve as your moderator for today's webinar. Now, before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so that you know how to participate in today's event. You should see the control panel on your screen in the upper right-hand corner. You are listening in using your computer speaker system by default, and therefore the computer audio button is selected. If you would prefer to join over the phone or something happens to your audio over the computer, just select phone call in the audio pane and the dial-in information will be displayed. But if you do that, be sure to enter your PIN number so you can participate properly. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the chat box of your control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during this presentation. We will collect and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. And then throughout these webinars, we ask a few poll questions to get your feedback and to make sure that you're awake. Our first one for today is, what is your member business type? So if you guys would just make your selections, contractor, inspector, distributor, manufacturer, or retailer. And always wait a little bit so that we have the majority of you voting, and then I'll close that out and share it with you. Okay, we'll close that out. So it looks like most of you are inspectors on this. 45% are inspectors, 24% contractors, 17 manufacturer, 14 distributor. So thank you so much for participating in that poll. And now I would like to introduce our presenter for today's webinar. Sergey Schlippentak has over 10 years experience in the floor heating industry while working at Thermostats. In that time, he has planned, supported, and provided assistance to countless successful floor heating installations. His responsibilities include overseeing the technical support team and acts as the primary contact for the wood flooring industry. Sergey is active on the NWFA Radiant Heat Task Force and on the UL Safety Technical Panel. His #1 priority on any floor heating project is to match the desired floor with the right heating system, installation method, control, and end user education to ensure the heated floor can be enjoyed for a lifetime. So without further delay, I'll hand it over to Sergey. There you can see a nice little photo of him. So hold on, Sergey, I am going to make you the presenter. There you go. Oh, wait, I have to unmute you, so hold on. There you go, Sergey. It's all set.
There you go. Can you, Mark, I think we have somebody here that's saying that they can't hear. Mark, can you hear me at all, or
Mark?
can a couple of people chime in that they can hear me or they can't hear me in the chat box? At least, Sharon, you can hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear you. That must be on their computer because I believe they have to check their volume. Maybe you're on mute, accidentally got on mute. So yeah,
and thank you, Tyler, for confirming that as well. And George, thank you that as well.
Okay.
Okay, so let's dive in a little bit. I'm sorry, Tom. I'm sorry, I can't do much about that. Okay, so let's dive into this this third of 3 webinars, and my contact information will be presented at the end as well. So if you have any questions that I don't get on the webinar, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask them directly. I'll even be, if there's no big questions here, that means either I didn't do my job well enough or I did it too well. But the focus of this particular webinar is twofold. Number one, it's to go over the installation of wood floors over the most popular electric radiant heating systems. We're not going to talk about hydronic in too much focus on this one. The reason we're focusing so much on electric, at least for the Thermosoft webinar, is because the new NWFA guidelines that are going to be sent out very shortly. I know they're right around the corner. Sharon, it's in the next month or two, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, everyone should be receiving their new copy in October.
So there's a big change in the new guidelines, specifically when it comes to radiant heating, as well as all of the other sections that the NWFA team has been working on. And thank you very much for all the hard work. The existing guidelines were very focused on any type of a heating system that was installed and embedded in the subfloor itself. That left a lot of systems out there completely unaddressed for the industry, especially with the wood floor industry. And that meant that many systems, particularly ones that are installed above the subfloor itself and systems that have no embedding in a cement or in the subfloor, weren't being addressed and had no instructions, guidance, or even knowledge that was conveyed to the wood floor industry from these types of systems or about these types of systems. And that glaring oversight is something that we're hoping to work with the NWFA to address by doing these series. So this particular webinar is going to focus on installing the different methods of installing wood floors over the most popular electric type heating systems, and how those systems will vary depending on the construction of the system itself and how it impacts the installation. The other part of it is how to manage some customer expectations when you have an electric system installed, because they function essentially the same as hydronic systems. However, they can be localized, and some systems are done when done properly, are a little bit slower to heat up, which means they're a lot more gentle to the wood floor itself. But the end result of heating is the same as a hydronic system without having to do the entire house. Typically, it's not cost effective to do anything less than 1,500 or 2,000 square feet with a hydronic system. And anything below that, if you're doing just a single room or a single floor, electric is going to be a lot easier to retrofit during a remodel or get installed during even initial installation without having to run water, boiling pipes, and worry about puncturing through a water pipe. Without further ado, let's kind of dive into this. So we'll start with the first poll question, at least for everybody. Have you ever installed, inspected, or used an electric floor heating system before?
Okay, the poll is out there, so please select yes or no. And I will close it out as soon as I get that majority voting. Oh, it's pretty even, but we'll go ahead and share that. Sergi, it's 52% no, 48% yes. So
that's great to hear. It's great to hear that a lot of people have used electric radiant heat in the past. And that's out of how many responses there, Sharon?
Roughly about 40 or so responses.
So 20 of you definitely yes, 20 of you definitely no, and a couple in the middle there. So with this presentation, as I said, we'll cover the most common types of electric systems, and we're not going to cover any of the low voltage systems. Essentially, they work the same way. They just require additional equipment to power them, and those are even more complicated and should be worked with specifically with the manufacturers of those systems in regards to any specific questions on that. One of the most common electric heating systems that you'll see out there is going to be in a form of a cable, and that cable can be put down in between sleepers. It can be put down into a membrane. It can be installed with a some sort of a cable guide, or you have to run it out at a specific spacing yourself. These cable type systems can be installed under most type of wood floors. However, you have to make sure that you properly encapsulate the cable in a self-leveling cement. So if you're doing a glue down type of a floor over this type of a heating system, you have to make sure that the cement is down first. Or if you want to do a nail down floor, you have to install sleepers first. So we're going to go into a little bit more details here. If you notice, we have in the first image, we have some sleepers being installed at your nailing schedule. These systems are very difficult to keep a proper nailing schedule. If you look at the first and the second photo, the reason being is that the heating cables themselves typically require anywhere from a 3 to a 4-inch space in between the different cables on center spacing. You cannot bring those cables tighter than the manufacturer recommended spacing, because it's going to create hot spots and make the system in general too hot. Because of that, you need to make sure that the schedule will work for your nailing schedule, particularly with any type of the sleeper that you put in, that you can space that sleeper accordingly. Now, you also need to make sure that the sleeper is thick enough to account for what is the manufacturer recommended thickness of thin set or self-leveling that is installed above this heating cable. In most cases, that's somewhere about 3/8 of an inch at a minimum. So you have to have a sleeper that's the appropriate width, spaced at the appropriate spacing, and the appropriate thickness, and then you run the cable back and forth in between the sleepers using some cable guides. Typically, every manufacturer will have their own version of putting those cable guides in. Once that's done, then you're pouring your cement, and make sure that that cement is properly moisture tested before doing any type of wood flooring installation. And then you could proceed with installing your wood floor, whether it be glue down, nail down, or floating. Over these types of systems, you would typically avoid the sleepers. You would put down the system completely on a subfloor, pour it in with a cement self-leveler, and then float a floor on top of this, or just do a solid glue down floor on top of this after the cement is properly cured. An easier version of the same type of a system is one where the cable is pre-positioned on a mesh. And these systems allow you to lay the floor out with the heating system significantly faster. But because they come in a fixed width, and that width can typically start at 12 inches and go up from there, there's no way to keep the appropriate nailing schedule that's needed for wood. So you're just you're arranging your mats out, you're covering them up with a cement, and then you're doing your moisture testing and installing your flooring. This would typically be done with a glue down or a floating floor only. Now, film heating mats is a very common one that you can even find in some places over the shelf. This is a very common system because the way that the construction of this system it's conducive to you being able to shorten these mats out in the field. One thing that a lot of people don't really consider is the fact that these heating mats, the film ones that are the complete plastic film, they are required to be installed with a vapor barrier, and this is a class 1 vapor barrier. So if you're putting this down over a space where a vapor barrier is not recommended according to the NWFA guidelines, and you should be using a class 2 vapor retarder, this system will either have that vapor barrier incorporated and be an integral part of it, so the entire mat is a vapor barrier, or you're required to put one down with the system below and above it. So you actually have 2 layers of a class 1 vapor barrier. So make sure you work accordingly with the manufacturers of these systems to know if it's right to go into the right space, and if you need the vapor transmission that some wood floors require, that this is not the system that is used. The installation of these systems would be a vapor barrier or vapor barrier underlayment that goes down. You'd arrange these mats, and you'd install a floating floor over the top. You cannot nail through film mats because of the spacing is so little for you to actually know where you're putting the nails in. And they always run parallel to the entire room. All the mats run next to each other across the entire room, as these illustrations show. There are some systems that do allow you to have a floating nail down and glue system and glue down system going through it. They typically come encapsulated together with an underlayment mesh. I'm sorry, underlayment already built into it. You avoid these systems typically for glue down and nail down installations unless the glues have been tested, and the nail down particularly because of the potential vertical deflection that is introduced with the padding being there. You need to make sure that the materials obviously match for everything that's needed there. What's common amongst all systems, and I'm going to circle back a little bit to this, is that the electrical planning between all systems is about the same, and all of them require some pre-planning for working with the electrician and working with laying out the space that you're going to be putting this in. A lot of the water-based hydronic or hydronic called systems that involve layouts, regardless of the system that you're choosing, you can typically cut the piping shorter, which is not something that you can do with any of the electric systems. The electric systems that do allow you to cut shorter are not typically installed in these types of applications, at least at this time. That may always change, and that's what we're here to reach out and help you answer those questions as manufacturers here. Now, an all-in-one system is very easy to install. You arrange your mats, you fill in the unheated areas with an underlayment that's matching the same thickness of it. That does not need that won't give you a height difference, and then you install your floor. Because it's an underlayment that's specifically designed for flooring already, with a floating floor, that's perfect, because this is the underlayment pad that's designed for that. If it's dense enough for the type of wood flooring that you're using, if it's like a specific board that the manufacturer of the wood flooring allows you to nail down over an underlayment pad, feel free to do so. Just make sure you don't nail into the spots that the manufacturers state that you can't nail into, and that's typically a thin wire right on top of the that's visible right on top of the mat. This is one of the mats that's very different from the existing installation instructions that the NWFA has, the installation guidelines, because this system is in direct contact with the wood floor, and that is the system that allows you to have the heat very gently go up and to the wood floor from there. Now, the wood floor installation itself, I'm sorry, the heating cable in a fabric mat, that's the last system, that's the most common system out there for this type of an installation. Some of these systems have gotten to be so thin that you can actually nail right through this, glue right through this, or install a floating floor over this, use this over any padding that you need there. And they're specifically designed for the wood floor type installations. Now, this type of a system, the installation process for this would be lay underlayment if you need it, arrange your mats, and install your wood flooring. As you can see, it's being nailed through right there. On each of these photos, as you can see, there's a wire that's running back and forth on that mat. That nail gun is nailing evenly between the two wires that it's in between. That way you make sure that you can keep your nailing schedule. For this particular system, the wires are spaced at 3 inches. So if you put a nail evenly between each of the wires, you're at a 3-inch nailing schedule, which is much tighter than most recommendations. However, 2 gives you 6, and that allows you to keep almost every single nailing schedule that you need, as well as allows the glue to penetrate through it when you're doing a double glue installation. When doing this type of installation with a double glue system, you have to make sure to put a thin layer of glue on the bottom and then a appropriate layer of adhesive on top of the mat in order to allow that to completely penetrate and encapsulate. If there are any questions for the installation, we'll address those during the Q&A. All heating systems require some sort of an electrical roughen. It's easier to keep a heating system that comes in those separate mat type formats, as you can see in the diagrams on your screen, next to each other. Depending on how wide those mats are and depending on how what the manufacturer calls for, you might need 1 or 2 electrical boxes that need to be planned with. You always want to get an electrician who's licensed, certified to do the electrical work in your area to work with you and rough all of this in prior to you actually getting in there and doing the wood floor installation. It'll be a lot easier to run the electrical wires to right underneath the wall or into the conduit as needed, and have that there rather than trying to come back and pull back baseboard or try to figure out if the wires are going in the right place. With any type of a heating system that you're putting in, whether it be electric, hydronic, data loggers are strongly recommended. Any type of a data logger that can store the data to see how the customer, the end user, is actually setting the floor and where they're changing it to will allow you to troubleshoot any problems in the future. The new guidelines have very specific instructions or recommendations to what to keep the floor, how to ramp it up and how to ramp it down, as well as what is classified as a hotspot. The homeowner shouldn't be adjusting the wood floor more than 5 degrees over a period of 24 hours. So if they're starting at a temperature of 65, between today at 65 and tomorrow, it should not go more than 70 degrees, go warmer than 70 degrees. If they want to get it from 65 to 75, that should take a 48-hour period of time in order to properly make those adjustments. The other fact is that electric heating systems, because they are all controlled by a thermostat, they don't have this cycle of temperature going up and down at nearly as wide of a swing as the traditional systems that some of you might be used to. And data loggers have shown, at least in our experience, that the humidity changes with an electric system very much follow the ambient rather than the heating system of the floor itself being cooked off. That's a big change with electric systems that are properly configured and gently warm up. You can get a system like the cable type system, and I'll circle back to this, that is installed with a wiring being too closely spaced together, and that will overheat the type of project that, or the wood itself, and that will be shown with a data logger as well. In most cases, most of these types of data loggers, and if you haven't seen these in the past, what they will do is they'll also allow the homeowner to see themselves the moisture content of the wood floor and know that there's a problem, that they need to do something before they actually start visually seeing the floor have some sort of an issue. Any radiant system, what it will do, it will bring heat into the space. And again, the data logger helps to see that there's a lack of humidity that's natural in the ambient that's not there because the heater is not turning on in the house enough to turn on the humidifier. One of my previous webinars that I did here, and Sharon will be more than happy, or I will be more than happy to share a link to it, where we actually discussed controlling humidity. I believe that was the second one, right, Sharon?
I believe so, yes.
So we have an entire webinar specifically with controlling humidity and controlling the heat with thermostats in the second webinar that we did in this series. Now, floor heating will typically have some sort of a thermostat that is specific to each zone of an electric floor heating system. UL requirements UL specifies that every electrical heating system be connected through some sort of a GFI or GFCI control, and almost all thermostats that are for this specific type of application have that built in for that simplicity. Every thermostat also includes a floor sensor that is installed in the floor with the heating system in order to allow the heating system to turn off itself when the floor reaches their desired temperature. Because the heating elements on an electric heating system are spaced so much tighter than your traditional hydronic type electrics or hydronic type heating systems, the heat penetration gets to the actual sensor much faster. In the systems that we ourselves carry, not a single one of our systems has a spacing wider than 3 inches. So from the heating element itself to where the sensor is installed, the maximum spacing that you're going to have there is only 1.5 inches. And for that heat to travel that 1.5 inches, it happens quite readily, and it's very responsive in the system to where you can actually see things balance out. Now, once you have this temperature achieved, the system doesn't need to be on for the floor to stay that warm. That thermal mass will keep everything nice and contained, and what that will allow from that point in time is the thermostat to properly cycle and maintain that heat very evenly on the floor without the creation of any hot spots. This is just a variety of different thermostats that you might see out there for you inspectors, or for anybody who is actually going to be offering this to their customers, that you can offer with the floor heating systems. We have an image here, or a chart here, and you know what, I'm going to try to adjust this chart just a little bit so we can see. I don't know why it cropped off there. For some reason, this image got cropped. But this chart is an example of the different type of systems. So we have the cable on mesh, we have the cable positioned by the ties, different fabric heating mats. You can see how many different installation methods you have here and which systems are allowed for what based on the descriptions. The fabric heating mat with the thermal cutoff allows you to have it both in the self-leveling cement, as you can see on the first column under the floating, but it also allows you direct glue down and direct nail down applications. You do have some of the heating cables that required always be embedded in cement and no other type of applications. Feel free to reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to share this chart with you in regards to helping you guide you whether the system is correct in what was chosen, or the system that you should choose would be an easier system to use. As you all know, there's many ways to install a wood floor. Some are correct, some work. There isn't any one definitive answer of what is the right thing, but there are ones that make the overall installation much easier, and hopefully this chart can help you figure all of that out. Now, how many of you have ever installed a heating system with over sleepers? That's the next poll question there.
Okay, I just launched it, and just make your selection, yes or no. Okay, I'll just keep it open for a couple more seconds. We will go ahead and close that. Big difference here, Sergi. It is 93% no, 7% yes.
I wish I could ask some of the people that said yes to chime in on their experience and whether they enjoyed the process or not. But
well, they could make a text, put it in the chat box if anybody has anything. You can do that.
The question would be, if you've done it, if I had a follow-up question with a one-word answer, would you do it again? And I don't think there's anybody replying just yet, but if they do, would you mind
Oh, yeah.
letting us know? You okay? So
Oh.
George is a yes. Okay,
I guess that's it right now.
that's it for now. So thank you, George. Um, I know for a fact that when customers feel radiant heat, whether it be under any floor covering, but wood especially, they love it. It's one of those things of where you don't have furnaces running very often. It's just, it's like being in a little paradise of your own. I speak from experience, especially since my wife will never move into a house that doesn't have it anymore since we just redid our floors and I put it in. I put it in everywhere. That's a mistake I made because now she won't let me move out of the house. As funny as it is, it really is a big change especially for people that suffer with allergies or any type of customer that doesn't quite know what they want, but they want to be comfortable. This is the ultimate in comfort for these types of, for any type of floor. Some of the things that you really need to manage for your customer expectations is that radiant heat is not instantaneous under any floor covering. If they think that they can just turn it on and it's all of a sudden warm, that's not correct. It's a slow, gradual increase in heat, even if they just crank it up. It's not like a furnace. Especially with a wood floor, as I mentioned earlier, the new NWFA guidelines state that they should not change more than 5 degrees per day. So that means, and that's going in both directions. That's going both up and down. So this is the time right now where at my house, we're doing an increase of a couple of degrees, 1 or 2 degrees per week, that as we're ramping up into getting into the colder season. I'm in Chicago. At this point in time, my floors are set to 63 degrees, I believe they were this morning. And next week, we're going to set it to 65. The following week, we might leave it alone or go to 67 degrees in order to just slowly allow that temperature to build up and let that floor very slowly keep that acclimation up there. And it's very easy for me to do all those changes with that Wi-Fi thermostat that I have installed, which is what I'd recommend for every client that we have. With hotspots, and this is something Brett wanted me to focus on, especially for the inspectors, anytime you have a heating system installed in that particular room, you shouldn't have a variance of more than about 3 degrees over that entire space. This is not going room to room. This is not going from one half of the room to the other. It's where you have a heating system. If there's a heating system installed in that space, that heat on that floor should be even once the system's heated up and reached its operating temperature. This isn't during the heat-up process. This isn't and it's only at that apex. Once you've reached that operating temperature, the floor should be maintained even, and that's that 3 degree variance there. For any of you that are in sales and do offer the radiant heat, if you have a customer that's had radiant heat in the past in the bathroom, convincing them to get radiant heat in a wood floor or any other room, very easy to do. I'm sure those of you who have tried it have experienced it. What customers need to understand when you're offering the system is that electric systems have very little significant impact on labor, depending on the type of system that you're choosing. If you choose the right system for the right installation, the system can be matched to your installation and installed pretty much the same day that you're doing your wood floor. If you don't have a particular allowance for that, it might make it very difficult to get that added on after the fact. But initially, it's very easy to bid with that type of a job and adding an electrical system right away, especially with any type of more complicated wood floors or more exotic woods. Understand that every single electric heat manufacturer or reseller will be able to help you figure out exactly what's needed there. Now, for the homeowners, as I mentioned before, a Wi-Fi thermostat is going to be much easier to allow them to properly control this. What I can do is I can go through with a Wi-Fi thermostat with the click of an app and say, I want all of my days for my thermostat to stay at this temperature and all of my nights to go down 3 or 4 degrees, just to make it set back a little bit if I feel like having that energy savings. I actually don't do that. I keep a constant temperature 24/7 on my floors. It makes it much easier. But your floors really shouldn't be setting more than 5 degrees in a day, and that's why a Wi-Fi thermostat will allow you to do all of your zones from one control device rather than one thermostat at a time. As I mentioned, the heating systems, depending on the system, you're typically going to have a thermostat per zone of the heating system. So you might have in a larger house 2, 3, 5 thermostats. So having a single place to control those is very, very convenient. The other part of it is explaining those gradual temperature changes and monitoring your humidity. The challenge with humidity, again, to kind of recap that, is not because the system dries anything out. It doesn't. A radiant system doesn't allow a typical home furnace to turn on, which means that the humidifier that's attached to that furnace, it will not turn on either. That's because the heat is so efficient and it's so penetrating that most homeowners will set their home thermostat, the air thermostat, back once they have a heating system installed, and there is no humidification in that space in the winter. I know last winter we had a couple of days in Chicago where the relative humidity outside was in the 10% range, and my floors were warm enough to where I actually opened up a window in the winter to get a little breeze because it was a little too warm, and I could literally watch the humidistat that I have in the room tick down on the relative humidity in the space as it dried out. For myself, I got a couple of those, the Vicks little steam humidifiers that get put in the room, and those work great to fill in the space until you can permanently work with an HVAC guy and solve that type of solution so it's automatic. But at a very minimum, the homeowners need to know that when they have a radiant heating system installed, their relative humidity in the space can and will most likely need some sort of supplemental humidification. Common homeowner questions: can electric heating systems function as a primary or a sole source of heat? They can definitely function as a primary source of heat. Depending on the environment, they may not be enough to be a sole source of heat in the coldest of days. Additional heating systems might be something like an electric furnace that's added in, or a gas furnace that's added in, an electric fireplace that also has a heater, a space heater, an in-wall heater, additional baseboard, like electric baseboard. There's many ways to add additional heating but still use the floor as the main one. The second question: how long does an electric radiant heat system last? They're installed typically for a lifetime. So as long as your floor is going to be there, that's how long the heat's going to be there. Will the heat hurt my wood floors? I can speak for Thermosoft. We've been around for 20 plus years. We've been selling systems for more than 17 years that have been installed under wood floors, and we have not had a single claim where the heat itself has actually hurt the floors. Now, I know that there are some guidelines with the wood floors that are not up to date, but that's what we're here to do. Can I install electric radiant heat in between floor joists or under an already installed flooring? Or do I need to replace my floors? That's a common one we get. Yes, there are systems that go in between floor joists. However, those types of systems still have the same limitations that you have with a hydronic type system. Actually more so, particularly because you have to do additional insulation underneath there, and depending on the system, it may actually act as a vapor barrier when underneath there. And if you're not doing it in the floor joists, do you need to replace your floors? Unfortunately, that answer is for homeowners, yes, but for us, that's another job that we put in a much better new wood floor for them. So I guess that's kind of a factor of job security there. General tips: when you're installing the heating system, learn how to test the system just to make sure that it's good, and test frequently just to make sure that everything's good while you're doing the installation. Maintain a proper distance for the spacing for the cables, particularly. Always install a backup floor sensor. Test and monitor humidity regularly and frequently. Having access to an infrared camera, and Home Depot now rents those out, helps demonstrate that the heating system is working even during the summer without having to actually get everything heated up. Collect all information before taking any action. As I said, the electric systems do require additional planning. Collect all the information and seek assistance from the manufacturers to help you know what you need to collect, whether it's before the sale, during the installation, or after during an inspection because there's some sort of an issue. If there is a problem that is determined, make sure that you not only talk to the wood floor manufacturer but also the manufacturer of the heating system, so both know what exactly is going on and figure out exactly how to fix the issue. There really aren't too many last thoughts. I rambled on quite a bit here for the last 40 or so minutes.
Well, thank you,
Let's get into some Q&A.
Thank you so much. We're now going to begin answering those questions submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit your text questions into the chat box in your attendee control panel. Sergi will be answering all those questions. So this is the part where you guys get to ask about the product. You guys get to learn a little bit more that wasn't on the presentation, and very often that you learn more in this part than you do during the presentation. So go ahead and type in your questions. No question is bad. So let's just start. And our first question, Sergi, comes from Rick. He says, most pre-finished wood companies do not allow an electric system, only water. How is your industry making inroads to get this changed?
So I can't speak for the industry specifically, but I can definitely speak for Thermosoft. We have already sent out quite a lot of samples specifically to every wood floor manufacturer that we could get a hold of on their technical side with the that are NWFA members. And we are very specifically making sure that we get the testing in place with these manufacturers to show this. The manufacturers, at least the ones that we've spoken with, all state that the NWFA guidelines need to change. Well, they're changing. The new guidelines allow electric to be right in contact with the wood floor as long as it's done properly. And we've taken every step possible there to make sure it's done properly by starting with a proper tailoring of the output of the heating system to make sure that it doesn't hurt the wood floor, by making sure that it's properly controlled, monitored, has data logging in there to make sure that when the manufacturer has an issue, that we know exactly what caused that issue and can step up and help solve that issue if it is something from us, which we haven't had yet, and we've had quite a few installations already done that way. As far as adhesives are concerned, that's also part of the wood flooring. Warm Step, which is a product that Thermosoft has specifically designed for wood floors, already addresses, has over a dozen adhesive manufacturers that we have worked together with in order to make sure that the adhesion is tested and approved. And I can start naming quite a few of them, like Tight Bond, Stuff, AAT, Dry Tech, and I can keep going with the list on that, but we've got quite a few of them there. Hopefully that answers your question in regards to that.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from David. What is your recommendation as a manufacturer for the maximum temperature to run the radiant heat system at? My assumption here would be not to exceed 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Secondly, when would you like to start the process for ramping up the radiant heat system versus how long after the wood flooring is installed? So there's a big couple questions there for you.
Couple of questions there. So as far as I'm aware, the new NWFA guidelines say that wood floors shouldn't exceed 82 as a maximum. Personal experience tells me that I typically don't set my floors more than about 74. When I set my wood floors more than 74 in any space, even if it's just a sole room, the rest of the room feels, and I say feels because when the feet are warm, the rest of the space feels a lot warmer than it actually is. The space in with the floor set to 74 degrees, the actual room air temperature is typically around 71. However, it feels like the room is at about 80. And it feels that warm that I need to start turning that temperature down. Now, everybody's going to be different, obviously, and I can't speak to that feeling for everybody, but it is common amongst all of our customers that we speak with that when the floor is warm, the room feels much warmer than the actual temperature is. Now, the second question of when to start the process of ramping up, I'd like to at least recommend to our customers that they start as soon as the temperatures start getting a little bit colder and when you start having nights when you can benefit from that actual heat. So we've had a couple of evenings in Chicago here where the temperatures have dropped already into the 50s, where the heating system really didn't turn on much, but it didn't allow it to cool down and didn't let the floors cool down in that case. The appropriate time to start turning it up would be middle of the fall in order to make sure that they can retain all of the heat in the system and they don't have to just crank it on and let it run for 24 hours straight, which is not the appropriate way to do that. And the last one of how long after the wood flooring is installed, because the electric flooring heating systems are installed at the temperatures, or the space needs to be properly conditioned to livable temperatures, and in some cases it might mean that you add space heaters, warm up the space, let that space acclimate just like the wood would. The floor can be turned on right away after the floor is installed and the adhesive is cured if you're using an adhesive. Do not turn on any heating systems in accordance with the adhesive guidelines or adhesive manufacturers guidelines to make sure that everything is cured properly. And then as soon as everything's cured, then you can turn it on. If it's a nail down floor, you can do it right away.
Okay. Jonathan asks, can a heat mat be dangerous and ignite a fire?
So Jonathan, I'm gonna address that question by showing our type of a system here. The warm step system that we sell is specifically designed to never have the ability to do that. And the reason for that is because every single inch of the heating element itself is basically like a thermal fuse. It's a thermal cutoff that if it starts going too warm, it disables itself. And there's usually a reason of why it starts going too warm, and that's because somebody either did something incorrectly, packed it up too much, or there's some sort of other heat source that's there. And this system has that inherent safety built in. Other systems are, if installed correctly, are tested by UL to prevent that type of situation from happening. However, again, that's if it's installed correctly, and that's why you have to check with the manufacturer to do that. I don't know of any system that has been installed correctly that has actually ever started a fire. And with Thermosoft in the decade plus that I've been here, I don't know, we haven't had a single fire claim since I've been here, nor since the beginning of the company, using our technology for these types of applications.
Okay, another question from David, or actually a couple questions. Does Thermosoft specifically specify that engineered hardwood flooring is used versus solid hardwood flooring?
So the new NWFA guidelines allow the system to be installed under both solid and engineered. Different species, and Brett actually had a great article in the Harvard Floor Mag that he spoke about certain species that are appropriate for radiant and not are recommended. I can't name those right off the top of my head right now. I need to refer to that. Obviously, Brett would be more of an expert on that. And as far as the thickness, any thickness is appropriate. That's appropriate for a wood floor. We've done many installations with every type of varying floor that we've had. We've never had any issues. The thicker the floor takes a little bit longer to fully for the heat for that penetrate through, and as that penetrates through, then it just holds that heat a little bit longer if the floor is a little bit thicker. A little bit thinner means that the floor will release that heat a little bit faster, cool off a little bit faster, and the system will cycle more often, but it's still going to be just as even of a heat, and it's still going to be just as comfortable for everybody.
I believe you can do a search for those articles at hardwoodfloorsmag.com. So if you want to see Brett's article, that's where you go. And then we have Krupa asking, I saw a mat with thermal cutoff. What does that mean?
So I elaborated to that a little bit already. That's this particular mat that it has that cutoff built into it. And what that does is it prevents that cable from ever overheating.
Okay. And Scott asks, a wood floor is for life. How long will these systems last?
These systems are designed to last for life, as long as they're properly used.
Okay. That was our last question. You guys still have time. We have a few minutes that we could answer some more questions. If you have them, please text them to us in the chat box. We'll just wait a couple minutes, but I want to thank you, Sergi. That was a great presentation. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar, sponsored by Thermosoft International Corp. If you have any other questions, Sergi, would you put your screen up with your contact information? There it is. Thank you very much. So that's where you go if you have more questions and we didn't have time for them today, or you didn't remember to ask that certain question, or something comes up. So once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we always appreciate your feedback. So please complete that survey. You will also receive a follow-up email in about a day, or even a little less than that, with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. All these webinars are also recorded and put on NWFA University. So if your company has purchased the pass, an all-access pass to the NWFA University, you can always go back on there and view any ones that you have missed. NWFA will continue to host free webinars on the second Wednesday of each month from 2 to 3 Central Time, with an occasional webinar on the fourth Wednesday of the month, which is the next one that's coming up. So be sure to register for the September 25th webinar presented by Bona on laying a solid foundation. Each webinar is worth 1 continuing certification unit in maintaining your certification requirements. So on behalf of NWFA and Thermosoft International Corp., thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you all.
I think we had another question from.
Oh, I see that, from Ryan.
From
yes.
Ryan.
Ryan asked, how much electricity do these systems use? That's a good question.
So the easiest way to calculate the amount of electricity is based on the square footage of the system installed. For warm step, these are typically 10 watts per square foot. That's less than you would see from a lot of other manufacturers that typically have 12 to 15 watts per square foot systems. Now, the 12 to 15 watt per square foot systems are designed usually for tile or to have that additional cement on top of that. Warm Step, or this particular system, is specifically designed for wood, and it's designed to allow that soft and gentle heat up. And to bring that question back to the a term that Ryan has, 10 watts per square foot at 100 square feet, you're using 1,000 watts. That's the equivalent of 10 100-watt light bulbs.
Awesome.
So it's not that much. It's very comparable to other things you have in the house without being too overpowering.
All right. That was it. I don't see any more questions, but just so you guys know, that new installation guidelines totally revamped. It's going to at least triple in size and content. There's a lot of great information, new information. In the years past, we've always patched up that installation guidelines. Now it's just totally overhauled, and you all will receive digital access to it. You can purchase a copy, but every company that's a member, the primary contact person will be mailed the new installation guideline in print edition sometime in October. So hopefully by the 1st or 2nd, like in the beginning of October, it's going to print, and it all depends on the printing company, but they're going to drop ship it to everybody on our list. So you want to make sure to download that and save it. So thank you all for joining us today. If you have any questions, be sure to contact Sergi, or if you have any questions on membership or certification or training or anything else, please give me a call. I would love to speak with you. So thank you all, and we'll see you next time, hopefully at the Bona one on the 25th.
And Steve, I do see that other question. Yes, you can use a generator if you have a backup generator. You just need to make sure that it's properly sized to accommodate for the heating system. What's good with an electric heating system is that you can actually have it on 1 or 2 specific zones, or 1 or 2 bedrooms specifically, to keep those rooms warmer while letting the other parts go down.
Okay. Thank you all. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.